If you're feeling overwhelmed with drawing, let me show you some tips that may help. But before I do that, I want to share with you this awesome guide that I put together. This is a guide that teaches you how to break down drawing into 3 easy steps. It's called Sketch 1, 2, 3, and it's a method that I teach all of my students, and it's a way to be able to draw anything. If you would like a copy of this guide, comment draw below and I'll send you the link. So one of the things that I learned when I was trying to draw and I kept feeling overwhelmed with my drawing was that I was committing to my lines too soon. In other words, I was doing an exact line and I wasn't allowing myself to be able to make adjustments. I had to do a lot of erasing. Some of my lines I couldn't erase because they were drawn too dark. So first thing you want to do is you want to draw lighter. So as you hold your pencil, if you hold your pencil far down on your pencil like this, you're going to press a lot harder than if you slide it further back. So if you tend to press hard, slide your fingers further back on the pencil and that will help. Let me show you a little bit about pencil pressure. So if you're drawing and you're drawing nice and dark like this, that is a number 10 pressure. But what you want to do is you want to draw nice and light and loose. And you want to keep it, it's almost like a whisper on the paper. You want to keep it light and loose, and you want to be able to see it, but not have, if you stepped away a few feet, you might not even see your lines. That's how light you want it. So this would be a number 1 pressure, and if I did a couple steps from this, I could go a little bit darker here, or a little bit darker here. This would be a number 2 and a number 3 pressure. My suggestion is that you keep your pressure in this area. Don't get into the darker areas, because when you get into the darker areas, you tend to grab your eraser all the time and you're trying to erase and make everything perfect, and you get caught in that perfectionist mode and you can't ever get things right without getting upset. So my first suggestion is keep it light with your pressure and make sure you're not committing with your lines. And when I say loose, instead of just drawing a circle like this, draw many lines and get that circle the way you want it. And then when you're starting to make corrections, you can choose which line you want to follow. So maybe you decide that your circle needs to be a little bit wider. You're going to choose one of the outside lines, and those inside lines will just recede into the background because they're light and loose. Let me show you a sample here. So this is a drawing I did a while back, and you can see that I just have one definite line everywhere, and I was so caught up in everything being perfect that I wasn't able to get my dimensions right, and I got caught up and overwhelmed really easily. But if I would have drawn loose and been able to adjust and push in the form, pull out the form however I needed to make it correct, I would have done a lot better. So this is a very committed drawing instead of keeping it light and loose. The next tip I have is understanding spatial awareness. What I mean by that is understanding your size and proportion, the angles, and the placement of everything. Let me explain that a little further. So if I drew a rectangle here, and in this rectangle I put some shapes. So maybe I put part of a circle here, and maybe a little circle over here. We're going to draw a square that goes off here, and then maybe we've got a triangle up here. Okay, if I gave you that same square and I asked you to draw these shapes in here, if you were able to put these shapes in the exact same spot that I have them in, then you have understood spatial awareness. You've paid attention to the space around each one of the objects, how much they overlap, what angle the shapes are at, and you have focused on each one of the objects in relationship to each other. So spatial awareness is key when you're trying to learn to draw. When we teach our students when they first start, one of the projects we give them is what we call a mystery draw. And we give them a stack of shapes like this. So they're just squares, and each one of the squares has a bunch of shapes in it. And what they have to do is they take a blank grid and they draw the shapes that they see in this box wherever they see them. They try to focus on their spatial awareness and make them fall into the square exactly where they see them. Then they'll grab another square and draw that, and little by little they put the picture together. But because they have no idea what they're drawing, they just have one square at a time, they can't just imagine what it is and just kind of draw a symbol of it. They have to trust the process, and they have to focus on their spatial awareness and their shapes. They can keep it light and loose as they're drawing to make sure they get it right before they commit to their lines. But as they start putting those shapes together, then the object emerges and they get the picture that they're meant to draw. So when you're drawing, make sure you're paying attention to the space around everything, the angles of things and the proportions of everything. So if we were to draw this turtle here, let's go ahead and push these off here. If we're to draw this turtle here, the next tip I have for you is to start with the basic shapes that you see. So instead of looking at this as a turtle, I'm going to look at this as a combination of shapes. And I'm going to start with my biggest shape, which would be an oval. And then I would have another round shape here. And you can see I'm doing light, loose lines so that I can make adjustments as I need to. And then I can just do ovals that kind of represent the legs. Can do another one for the neck, and even a little one here for the tail. And I've kept it nice and light and loose. But what I've done is I've created a foundation of shapes for the object. And instead of looking at it and saying, I'm drawing a turtle, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I'm drawing the shapes that I see in this turtle. And then I'm going to combine those shapes together to make the turtle. So when you first start a drawing, one of the best things you can do is start with the shapes. Another thing to do is focus on the negative space. As you're changing it into an object, look at the negative space. Negative space is the space around an object. So if we look at this turtle, this is the object, but the space around the turtle is the negative space. So if I'm looking at the negative space, this area right here is the negative space. If I get this shape right, then I have the angles of each one of these legs correct. So what I want to do is I want to show you how we can use negative space to make sure that everything falls into place. The last tip that I want to share with you is a plumb line. So if you take a straight edge and you use a plumb line is a line that goes perfectly up and down or horizontal, and it lines up different elements in your drawing. So let's just slide this over and see how things line up. If I used this for the edge of its eye, where does it line up? I'm just going to slide it over until I can see that the edge of the eye here lines up with the edge where his leg comes out and almost to the tip of his toe there. So I'm going to draw a line here. That is called a plumb line. So as I'm drawing and I'm making my picture here, if I make sure that I use a plumb line and make sure that these elements line up, then I'll have my drawing more accurate. So let's go ahead and implement these tips. But before I do that, if you're interested in the Sketch 123 PDF download that I have, comment draw below and I'll send you the link. So let's go ahead and put this picture together and implement these things that we talked about. I'm going to go ahead and change these shapes into the object, and I'm going to focus on just combining the shapes together, and I'm not focusing on detail. I'm just going to focus on the shapes. So you can see I'm drawing light and loose, and I am paying attention to the basic shapes that I see. And I am changing the shapes that I see. You can see my circle went way high. I'm changing that and making it more shallow. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it light and loose and make the changes that I see. Now as I start drawing, I can put in a plumb line. I'm going to just put in a plumb line right here on the edge of the eye. And I'm going to make sure that the eye lines right up with this. And then I'm also going to look at the negative space. So as I look at the negative space, I can make sure that the legs are in the right spot here, and I can look at the negative space all the way around it. Okay, so you can see we have light, loose lines. We have a plumb line to give us guidance. We can look at the negative space. There's a variety of different things that we can do. And it looks kind of messy right now, but that's okay. If we keep our lines light and loose, the lines will recede into the background and we can just erase any of them that are causing confusion. I've done a little bit darker so that you can see, but go ahead and try this. Try implementing these tips, and it will help you with your drawing so you're not feeling quite so overwhelmed. So let's go ahead and recap the different tips. First of all, we're going to draw light and loose. We're going to use our pencil from the far end. If we press too hard, we're going to focus on our pencil pressure, draw light lines, many lines. Remember, many lines give you many options, so draw many lines, and that way you'll be able to adjust your shapes, push them in, pull them out, and correct them so that they're the shape that you need. The next thing is to understand spatial awareness. Make sure you're paying attention to shapes of things, angles of things, where they are placed, and the space around them. The next tip is to start with shapes. Keep them light and loose. Don't start with the object, just start with a combination of shapes and change those shapes into the object. The foundation of the shapes will help you create the object so much easier by starting with that foundation. The next thing is negative space. If you're looking at the negative space around an object and the object itself and bouncing back and forth between the two of them, that's called ground reversal. And using that will help you so much. Being able to focus not only on what you're drawing here, but the space between things will help you get things in the right spot. So make sure you're paying attention to negative space. Use plumb lines. They can be vertical or horizontal to make sure everything is falling in its place. So if you are overwhelmed with drawing, remember these tips. And don't forget, if you'd like my PDF download, Sketch 1, 2, 3, comment draw below and I'll give you the link. I hope that helps.